Angeline, we just want to thank you for the opportunity to be here and to have an opportunity just to share with some of our friends and colleagues and just talking about the whole idea of a Christian response to civic engagement. And hopefully, when we're all said and done, people will feel energized. They'll feel that there may be some new things they can look to do that maybe they haven't done before. But hopefully, at the end, everyone will just be comfortable in knowing that we just wanted to ask people to bloom wherever you're planted. Don't try to become someone new. Don't try to operate outside your gift. Take the gifts that God has given you and just utilize it in a way that will draw more men and women closer to Him in a Christ-like way. So, looking forward to engaging some more. So, why do you even want to participate? That's probably one of the big questions that's asked all the time. Do I really want to get involved? Do I really want to engage? In our department, we have a tagline we try to operate from, which is called making friends before we need friends. Sometimes the whole idea of participating is really just connecting and creating new relationships, letting people know who you are. In public affairs and religious liberty, we think a lot about the religious liberty side of what we do, taking care of individuals, protecting them with Sabbath accommodations. But the public affairs side of the business is actually really letting the world know who you are and why you are. And what we have found out, if you do a good job on the public affairs side of the business, if you spend time connecting with individuals, then they're more interested in the religious liberty side of what you do. And if they have a better idea of who you are and what you stand for, it makes all the difference in the world. I think the other reason why we really need to participate is because I think it's a gospel imperative that we participate. The Bible has called us as people of God to be the salt of the earth and to be the light that will be used to direct individuals. And as I like to tell people, I've never seen any food flavored with salt that stays in the salt shaker. You've got to get out and connect in order to make a difference. We always talk about not hiding your light under a bushel. Well, the best way to do that is to go out to engage with individuals and let them know why you should go forward and do that. And, I love one of these scriptures that come from Solomon in Proverbs 31 verses 9, where the Bible calls for us to speak up, judge fairly, defend the rights of the poor and the needy. I mean, the Bible is telling us what it would have for us to do. It lets us know that it's so important that we don't sit passively by, that we do get engaged, we do something. And there's a reason why when you get to the kingdom and those critical questions are going to be asked, it's not going to be asked whether or not you were at Sabbath school on time, or whether you got your 10,000 steps in, or whether you're a vegetarian or not a vegetarian. The question is, when people are hungry, did you feed them? When people were naked, did you clothe them? When they were in prison, did you visit them? In other words, what did you do for the least of these? And I think this is what God has called us to do. Dr. King had a quote that I just recently connected with, and it says, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter. It seems to me that we as Christians, because of the training and the goodness that God has given to us in our lives, and Seventh-day Adventists are some of the most blessed Christians in the world, that it's our responsibility not to be silent, that we should stand out, that we should make a statement and bring people closer to God in a way that they will know and possibly see a little bit of Jesus in us. And some people will say, well, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to go about doing it. I don't have that skill set. I don't talk well. I call those the Moses excuses. I stutter. I'm this, I'm that. Well, Micah 6 verses 8 kind of tells you that you don't really have to worry about anything. It just simply says, he has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? Act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. And if you do those things, you will probably be one of the greatest representatives that our church will ever see as it relates to engaging and participating in politics and church and your community and wherever that you would like to go. And I would just kind of close out this section with a scripture from Mark 12, verses 30 and 31. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. And the second is, and love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. It's impossible to connect with your neighbor, to love your neighbor, and to make an impact on your neighbor unless you actually know who your neighbor is and go out and connect with your neighbor from time to time. So I simply say that the reason we have to participate is because this is what God has asked us to do. Go out and make an impact, bloom wherever we're planted, and utilize the God-given gifts that we have as Seventh-day Adventist Christians to make a positive impact on the world. And last, I'll just point out, the world is looking for us. Sometimes we're a little worried about getting involved, but the fact of the matter is there is something that we have that the world can use. And it's so important that we not be afraid to go out there and share it. So that's why I think we should go about getting involved and why we should participate.
So thank you, Orlan. And now that we've heard the why we should participate, I'm going to talk a little bit about the what, the how. So as you can see from the graphic here, we want to avoid partisan politics. Well, you know, Angie mentioned today is election day here in the United States, and just about we're just inundated with partisan politics. It's in our yards, it's in our mailboxes, it's on our television screens, on our phones. Unfortunately, that's sort of the law of the land right now. But we are called, of course, as Orlan said, to be the salt and the light, and to be above such politicking. And I'm just going to go through a few reasons why, or as far as the dangers of partisan politics. Maybe you have heard someone say, or said this yourself, or thought this idea, this sort of sentiment of, as a Christian, I can't believe that you're voting for, and then insert the opposing candidate, the candidate that they are not voting for. I won't ask for a show of hands if you have thought that, or if you have said that, but we probably all have certainly heard that sentiment. I would like to posit that God does not have a political party affiliation, right? Jesus is king of the universe, and he is above and beyond any sort of human kingdom. You know, that was what was happening, of course, when Jesus Christ was here on earth, is that the Jewish population was clamoring for him to establish his kingdom here on earth. And his kingdom, as we know, is above and beyond any sort of earthly entanglements. So we should keep in mind that we are electing, I guess my first point about avoiding partisan politics would be that there is not one perfect political party.
Amen.
And we need to keep in mind that we are electing human beings to represent our political interest and not a savior. So I think we need to be realistic about what we are expecting from our candidates, from our political representation, but also not sort of over anticipating or over expecting certain things from them. They are human beings just like we are, and we are all flawed. And so one candidate or one political party is not going to adequately fulfill the mission of the gospel imperative, as Orlan spoke about it. Ellen White wrote about the dangers of partisan politicking. This is actually in a letter that she wrote on December 27 in 1896. And she said, "There is danger, decided danger, for all who should link themselves up with the political parties of the world. There is fraud on both sides. God has not laid upon any of our people the burden of linking up with either party. We are under Christ's banner, and everyone who names the name of Christ is to depart from all iniquity."
Amen.
So I think the danger here that we want to talk about is what can happen, where we can go when we associate too broadly or too to too much of a degree with a particular political organization. Now, of course, we're going to vote today. As you can see, I have my I voted sticker on right now. And you know, I voted for different candidates that had D's or R's next to their names. That's not what we're talking about, of course. And even, you know, working for political, working in government or for political campaigns, again, that's not what we're talking about. We're saying putting the principles or the party platform above the biblical truths, your biblical imperatives. So I think that we have seen on social media sometimes in our conversations, maybe when we go out to eat with our friends or, you know, with our colleagues, sort of the worst human behavior, sort of the worst of ourselves displayed when politics comes up. And we sort of accuse and vilify people who believe or take a different position on political issues than we do. And again, as Orlan mentioned, we're called to love our neighbors, right? This is not who we're called to be as Christians. We're supposed to be above these sorts of attitudes and instincts. And in fact, we've seen many relationships, individuals become alienated from families and friends because of this toxicity. And when you think about sort of the level of impact that someone's political persuasion can have on them, you have to sort of wonder, where does this come from, except that a belief that their political ideology is the most important thing in their life. Mm. I mean, that's a hard, humbling thing to think about. If you're having disagreements and you're unfriending people on Facebook or whatever your social media platform is, because you all disagree on political interest, I think that says maybe something about a misprioritization of your political interest. So again, no one party is perfect, and no one party monopolizes the kingdom of God. The next point that
I think one good point you're raising on that, you know, I think we as Christians really need to be careful of. And I think Melissa's really leading us in that direction. You know, church is supposed to be a safe place for all to go. You know, that's supposed to be a place where we go and we learn about the love of Jesus, and to try to bring partisan politics into a place where we're coming to hopefully meet with individuals and congregate and love one another, and to just develop this kind of negative attitude towards each other is something I think that we as a church really have to be careful of. You know, people like to say, well, the church is just a microcosm of society. You know, so because the more partisan society gets, that's just naturally how partisan the church needs to get. But God has called us to be a peculiar people. He has called us to be a group that when they look at us, they're supposed to say they don't look like everything else. And I think what Melissa is really bringing out to us as well is the idea that as Christians, as Adventists, we should really, really concentrate more on the idea of making sure this is about our fellow man and not whether we're wearing blue or red or voting blue or red.
Absolutely. Thank you, Orlan. And I guess one way to say that would be have our faith shape our politics and not our politics shape our faith.
Amen.
So, you know, again, talking about the relationships that we have within our communities, with our neighbors, with our friends on social media, how do people define you, or how do people know you? You know, what are the strong characteristics that are coming out? Are you talking, are you sharing your faith? Are you, you know, posting about, you know, something spiritual, or are you forwarding the latest, you know, political issues or slants or promotions or ads? So I think we want to take intentional steps to actually think about who we are displaying, what aspect of ourselves is taking priority.
Amen.
So blind allegiance to a political party leads to blind submission to that party's ideology. And again, that goes under that, how does our faith shape our politics rather than the other way around? Because when we have a blind allegiance to anything. When we talk about we cannot, the Bible verse says we cannot serve two masters. Well, that's talking about God and money. But we're talking about anything that is taking priority over your allegiance to God. And so we need to be deliberate about establishing relationships with a diversity of population groups in order to better understand our neighbors, right, and the needs of our community. Now, as Seventh-day Adventists, we are really fortunate in this area because, according to Pew Research Forum, we are the most diverse religious organization, or religious denomination in the United States, in ethnicity, in race, and in political ideology. So we have, just in our little microcosm of a faith tradition, we have the opportunity to get to know and understand a world, a diversity of worldviews that are not similar to our own, except for our commitment to the love of Jesus Christ and sharing that with others. And so I think that's a real opportunity that we have just in our local congregation. Because as we know, confirmation bias exists, which of course confirmation bias is the tendency to embrace information that supports our own viewpoint. And so by widening that circle and our perspective, we are able to better recognize and understand and be compassionate towards people in other situations. Now, there's nothing wrong with affiliating with a particular party, but what we definitely need to do is make sure that we maintain a posture of collaboration, active listening, holding that political party and our politicians accountable, and engaging that system, all the while understanding that it is not our ultimate hope or answer. Amen. So using it in its proper sphere. And in addition, we must never lose the courage or the conviction to speak prophetically to this group of people. We are not lured by the power that is associated with politics.
Well, let's add to that point that you're raising there, and I think something that's really important. And when we decide that we want to go out and be a representative of Christ, it's important that we be consistent in who we are. There's nothing more troubling than you are supposed to be representing our church, and then you go out and one day you do this and one day you do that. It was a real interesting story. One day when I was doing some work for the Obama administration on a campaign, and I've shared this story with Melissa, I went out to eat dinner with a group of people who I'd been with for a couple of months. And one of the people looked at me and they said, "Hey, Orlan, the stuff you eat is on page 3. And at first I was kind of offended. I didn't know if this was a weight thing they were talking to me about. And I started thinking to myself, all right, shots are being fired. But what I realized is that they had been watching what I eat. They saw that there were certain things that were not a part of my diet. And you think to yourself, you don't even know people are actually watching you. And that's why when you decide that you want to go out and represent Christ, it's important not to be a secret agent for Jesus, but to be a uniformed soldier as to who you are. And don't try to hide who you are, because eventually it'll come out anyway. And, and I think part of being out there and being a good witness is understanding that you are witnessing in every aspect of what you do.
Absolutely. Thank you. So one of a book that I read in preparation for this presentation, and our at the end we'll have a selection of resources that we recommend, but it was written by Eugene Cho, who's a pastor in the Pacific Northwest and also runs a nonprofit organization. But he had a quote that was dealing with the dangers associated with partisan politicking. And he says, when Christians pledge blind allegiance to a political power and its leaders, and cannot objectively evaluate what a politician states or espouses, we travel down a dangerous path. We cease to see the world informed first and foremost by the life and teachings of Jesus Christ. Instead, when we allow political allegiance to identify us, we distort the Bible to justify our politics and allegiances. And then he says, this is idolatry.
Wow.
Now that is a strong statement, but if we are humble in our hearts, I think it's one that we need to consider. Probably. So my last point for this particular section, this avoiding partisan politics section, is that we need to keep in mind that all of us are image bearers, and our fellow image bearers are not our enemy. Our enemies, as this Bible text says, Ephesians 6:12, we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities and against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. Again, we are called to care for our neighbors, to be sharing the good news of Jesus Christ, soon return with them, not looking at an us versus them mentality, regardless of differing political beliefs.
Amen. Amen.
So now we're going to move on to ways to engage as a Christian within the political and civic community. And I'm going to go ahead and start with what I think is the most essential component, which is prayer. Now, I think there should be several different prayers here. I think one, there should be prayers for ourselves, and how, again, Orlan mentioned Micah 6:8, and we talk, we emphasize so much the do justly and love mercy, but we don't spend as much time on the walking humbly with our God. And I think that when we are praying for ourselves prior to engaging in this very volatile environment, asking for the Holy Spirit to guide us, I think that's an important thing to do. As you know, Paul told Timothy that we should be praying for our leaders, for our elected officials. And again, I think that's a humbling thing to do when you do not agree with the politics of the individual in power. It's hard to feel, you can disagree with issues, but it's much harder to have anger or hatred or any of these negative emotions towards individuals if you were praying for them. And so again, we should be praying for each other, for individuals that believe differently than us. This is something that I really appreciate about our department in the Public Affairs and Religious Liberty Department, is that we stand for the rights of religious freedom for all people everywhere, not just for Seventh-day Adventist faith tradition. And so I think that is congruent with this, as far as we are praying for all of our brothers and sisters in this political realm, and not just those that believe the same as we do.
I think another thing that's very important before you get out there and really start doing engagement is to educate yourself on what's going on. Sometimes as Adventists, when we show up, we like to show up with our own playbook, our own infrastructure, our own method of what we may want to do. And sometimes you have to find out what has been going on there before I got there. How can I find out what's already going on? What's going on in our communities. And, I give you a perfect example. When the North American division first came to Columbia, and our team, including Melissa and I, we were working on putting together a fresh fruit produce giveaway. And we were going to be giving away 20,000 pounds of fresh produce in the community. We were picking this date. We were so happy about it. And then we happened to check in with our local council person. And we said, hey, this is what we're going to do. This is the day we're going to do this. And then she said, oh, if you do it that day, you could potentially put the farmers market out of business that's up the street. And we were like, oh, wow, didn't know that. And sometimes when you have no idea what's going on, you could end up doing what you think is the greatest thing in the world and actually end up causing all kinds of issues because you didn't educate yourself about the community. So we ended up picking a day that was closer to Thanksgiving, in which we knew that the farmers market wouldn't be open on the Sunday before or the Sunday after. So we were not going to be impacting their business in any way. But it's so important to find out what's going on before you really jump in the water and thinking that you're ready to swim. You know, the other thing is even educating yourself on what's going on in local politics. I'm sure many of us have gone out to vote, and we see some names there that we have no idea who these people are, you know, and we just start checking boxes. And I told Melissa this great story. I took my two sons to go vote, and we get back in the car, and my oldest son says to me, "Hey, Dad, I saw grandma's name out there, this woman named Joycelyn." I was like, "Really?" He was like, "I voted for her." And my youngest son was high-fiving him. "Yeah, I saw that. I voted for her too." And I said, "Do you guys have any idea who Joycelyn is?" They were like, "Well, no, but it's grandma's name." So we finally had to pull the car over, have a conversation to understand that you ought to educate yourself as to who these individuals are, what they stand for, because sometimes you're making votes and sometimes you're doing things that you could be putting somebody in almost for a lifetime. But if you don't understand what the process is, you can put yourself in a position where you can end up causing more harm than good. But it's so important to find out what's going on. You know, Melissa spends a lot of time in communities, and when we were doing our food giveaway, we were able to connect Melissa with the school systems in our area. And they even allowed us to put our flyers in the backpacks of kids to go home. And this is all because of connecting, educating, find out what can be impactful, and just hopefully drawing them in, not to elevate yourself, but to elevate Christ in some way.
So we couldn't let today pass and this presentation pass without saying we should definitely exercise our right to vote.
Amen.
So again, when we think of the mentality of loving your neighbor as you love yourself, I would encourage that mentality as we look at the opportunity, and it is such an opportunity. It's a privilege to be able to cast a ballot, right? We know that there's many around the world that do not have free and fair elections. We know that in our own country, African-American men and women, white women, and Native Americans did not have the right to vote. And Native Americans were actually the last of those categories to receive the right to vote. And so this is it is very much a privilege and an honor, and something that we should look forward to the opportunity to serve our community in this way, the best interest of our community in this way. Again, politics and policies affect people. And we love people. That's what we're called to do, right? And so that's why we should participate in this process. So not just exercising your vote, but also I think it's important to make sure that others have the opportunity to vote as well. Now, I want one thing that has been an opportunity of this unfortunate pandemic that we're experiencing is the opening up of mail-in ballots, and how so many people that had trouble getting to election sites, whether it was because of getting off work or just transportation issues or daycare, childcare issues, whatever the situation was, having the opportunity to vote through the mail has really, as we can see, increased the number of the amount of participation. I don't think that's the only reason why participation has increased this election, but certainly having access to the ballots, having those ballot boxes set up everywhere. But again, as we're establishing those relationships in our community, if they're, have those conversations with the older generation that it's your neighbor, and ask them if they need a ride to the polling place in a post-COVID era where it's okay to do those, offer those sorts of things. Or if your neighbor has young children and can't get away without, because they need to care for the young children. Offer to watch the kids for a couple hours so that they can take that opportunity. So don't just, again, protect your right to vote, but make sure that everyone has that right to vote. Again, God has given us the freedom of conscience, and not just for those who believe like we do, or who believe or who honor, or even who honor him, but he's given all of us the freedom and the right and the privilege to choose and make our own decisions. And so we want to honor that in this regard.
Amen. Now, I know this is one that may cause a little bit of angst, but another way that you can engage civically is pay your taxes. Use your resources that God has blessed you with to actually render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar, and render unto God the things that are God. You know, one of the things that sometimes we forget about when we pay taxes is many of the resources there actually go to lift up individuals who cannot afford to take care of themselves. This is an opportunity for you to take care of those who are in need. These monies go to pay for public schools. It goes to pay for free lunches and breakfasts and things that actually help to make what I would call the least of these sometimes taken care of in ways that they would not be able to take care of themselves. So being able to go out and just to engage in the civic role of paying taxes is something that I believe is required of us as Christians, and required of us as being just good civic-minded individuals. The other thing that's very important for us to do is to engage in what we call jury duty. When you get that letter in the mail, the first thing should not be, how can I get out of this? Who can I call? Do I have something else that I have to do? Part of this is your community activity. You get to learn more about what's going on in your community. You get to learn more about the system of justice. And the Bible calls for us to understand justice and to think justly and to be engaged in what he would call the path of justice. So this is a great way for us as Christians to stay connected, to put us in a position where we can make sure that we're doing our civic duties, and that's by going out and engaging in jury duty and doing our part as well.
Yes, so another way that we can participate in this civic environment is advocacy. So that picture that you see right there is actually, so my job is I'm a professional advocate for the Seventh-day Adventist Church and the interests of both the church as an organization and its members. And so what you see here is a press conference announcing a particular piece of federal legislation. That's the member of Congress in the front who sponsored the bill called Fairness for All. So, but you don't have to, and I certainly encourage you, you don't have to be a professional advocate. As individuals, we are all have our own voices, and we honestly, those voices representing who are parts of congressional districts are much more valued by the members of Congress or your state legislatures than my voice as a professional advocate is. You are their constituents. And so again, as Orlan said, educating yourself and then advocating for the issues that you believe in based on your biblical beliefs. And so there are so many different ways to advocate. There's marching with some people don't want to march. Some people that's not what they're called to do. Some people have mobility issues and they're not able to do that. Some people will send emails. Some people will write a letter. Some people will hold events like this as an educational aspect, and they will advocate for things online. Some people will use social media as an advocacy tool. All of these things there is no right or wrong way to advocate for your personal convictions that are constructed by your biblical beliefs. It's just find a way to do it.
I think another thing that we have to spend a fair amount of time doing is just building relationship with our public officials. And sometimes you may look at this and say, well, these are individuals that don't really care about what we're thinking about. And some of the pictures that we have here is, our local county executive in Howard County, where we have our office building, and we had a luncheon where he came by and met with our leadership. And and Melissa will tell you, I have this pet peeve about, when you come off the highway to us, that you have to get all the way over into the left-hand lane so quickly. And when our county executive came by, he said, "Hey, that's a little dangerous out there." And I was like, "I'm glad you brought that up, because I think we need to do something about that." And just so you know, in about 2 years, we're going to have a new little interchange there. And some of it is because of relationship. We were able to assist with getting some funds for students that couldn't afford school lunches. And we were shocked to find out that, Howard County, Maryland, where our office is, the second richest county in the United States, and the elementary school that's closest to us has over 800 homeless children there. So the demand and the needs are so intense and so powerful. But when you build these relationships, you're able to learn ways that you can make an impact. And if you're not talking to them, then you're not in a position where you can actually really know what's going on. So it's so important that we build these government relations. And this is a job that Melissa does on a daily basis for the Adventist Church.
So Orlan, one thing I was going to add to that is, as we are establishing those relationships, we then become a resource for these individuals. And they look to the Seventh-day Adventist Church for health information, for guidance on how to run, various community health programs. For, they call and let us know when the food bank is low and we need more food involved. When during COVID, they were looking for space, and our parking lot is big. For outdoor meeting space. And so they contacted, again, just having these relationships and being seen as a resource in your community, someone who cares about everyone there, everyone in the community. So again, serving your community, we establish these relationships with our government officials, and then we serve our community. And, Orlan mentioned our food drive a couple of times that we've done. That's him at the top giving out some lettuce. And then the picture below is actually our Lieutenant Governor of Maryland speaking at our second annual prayer breakfast. Now, every January is a national holiday, the Religious Freedom Day. And so we have instituted a prayer breakfast here at the North American Division. And we have had such a positive response as far as attendance and just comments afterwards, as far as the faith leaders that come and participate, just from a variety of faith traditions. Of course, we have so many of our own local pastors and administrators participating as well. And then we have our civic leaders. We have both years, we've had the sheriff come out and participate. He knows Orlan by name, by sight, by face now. We had our fire chief come, and then we've had representation from both here in the county and on the state level as well. So serving your community and having them see us as a resource. And then I would say another way to serve the community is to serve in a government position. Now, we've been saying all of these things about being wary about politics and partisanship and all of that, but think of our biblical examples of individuals who served their nations with integrity. They didn't lose their identity in Christ, right? But Daniel, Nehemiah, Joseph, all of those individuals were integral to the government that they lived in, the time that they lived in, but they didn't compromise their own faith tradition to do that.
And I think at the end of the day, all of this that we do is about making sure that everyone knows that Jesus Christ is the King of our lives. And none of us are getting caught up in the fact that there are elected officials that are here, that are going to be on this earth, because we all know that one day that we serve a God who will be the King of Kings, who will be the Lord of Lords, who is the individual that we never have to worry about wondering who's in charge, because the Bible tells us that he puts kings up and he takes kings down. And and I've been fortunate to have worked for both political parties. I've worked for Republicans, I've worked for Democrats. I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly on both sides. I don't sleep better with Obama as president or sleep any worse with Trump as president. At the end of the day, the Bible tells us that he who the Son sets free is free indeed. All of our freedom is tied to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. All that we will ever want to do comes simply from being close to him. And I love Isaiah 59 verse 8, which has a scripture that to say that the way of peace they do not know. There is no justice in their path. They have turned them into crooked roads, but no one who walks along them will know peace. Unless you are on that straight road of justice, peace will never come your way. And I think when we get concerned, we can always look to John 16, verse 33, that lets you know that these things that he has spoken to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer, because he says, I have overcome the world. No matter how good the politics is, our God is still in charge. No matter how bad the politics is, our God is still in charge. So at the end of the day, we're doing the work that God would have for us to do. And we just hope that this has been something that has kind of helped you a little bit, figuring out ways to participate, understanding why you should participate, different ways that you can engage, and how to make sure that Jesus Christ is first and foremost in everything that you do.
Amen. And thank you so much, Orlan. Thank you, Angie and Phil, and all the rest of the Health Ministries team. This has been such an incredible opportunity for us. I just want to share a couple of resources. First of all, we have our Religious Liberty Manual that's just recently been updated by our NAD team, but also all of our religious liberty leaders around the country. That's available by PDF. You see our emails there. If you would like a copy of that, please send us an email. We'll be happy to send you a copy. Also, a great book that Liberty Magazine has put together custom printing is The Spirit of Prophecy Councils Relating to Church-State Relationships. This is a really great resource. I make use of this all the time. We have a few of the printed copies. We also have it available in PDF. Again, send us an email if you would like a copy of that. Complimentary copy, we will send that to you. As we have hard copies available, and then of course the PDF. The quote that I had earlier, I mentioned the book by Eugene Cho. I really recommend it. It was very well written, really balanced, and as far as politically, but also it was just first and foremost about being followers of Christ above anything else. And so it was called Thou Shalt Not Be a Jerk, A Christian's Guide to Engaging in Politics. So that's what I recommend. And then finally, Compassion and Conviction. I actually haven't read this yet, but I'm recommending it without having read it because the authors are colleagues and good friends of mine. We work together on advocacy work down in DC. But it's the AND Campaign's Guide to Faithful Civic Engagement. And again, it's about having your faith inform your politics and not the other way around. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you so much, Orlan and Melissa. Wow, there was just so much information here. I feel like we could keep going on this conversation for a few hours, but we do want to jump to the breakout groups. Before we do, I have a quick question. What about the role of the religious liberty leader at our local churches? Can you speak a little bit more towards how you see them engaging in this capacity and what they can bring to their local church?
Well, I think one, well, go ahead, Melissa, you go.
I was going to start and I'm going to let you finish because but one thing I was going to say, because it just popped into my head right away, is when I've served as a local religious liberty leader at my church, that is a great way to be able to get to know your community leaders by inviting them to come and participate in roundtable discussions. Again, that's, would have been tricky this year, not so much because of our churches being closed, but because of this being an election year. And we certainly don't want to invite individuals to come and then use our pulpit as a place to run for office. But establishing those relationships with your government officials is something that I absolutely think a local religious liberty leader could and should do.
The other thing I think that they can do, Angeline, which is really important, is to engage in relationships where you have nothing that you're asking for. This is an opportunity for you to simply go out and offer yourself up, offer your church up, offer the opportunity to be helpful in the community where you are. No ask, no agenda, and that probably is the best way to begin a relationship, has been my experience.
Thank you very much. And I could maybe venture to guess that you would love to see more religious liberty leaders at our organizations, at our churches, and maybe somebody could contact your office to get some information on how to get started.
We Absolutely. Could not have said that better.
Absolutely.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I think this is such a great sphere of influence that we can have. So we're going to stop here. We're going to jump into our breakout rooms for a 15-minute discussion. So we will see you back here in about 15 minutes. You might get a note to join the breakout room. We will also take some questions after we come back. So we'll see you back. Let's go ahead and start sharing some of the responses that we heard about to these questions. Each group, almost each group, had a different question. So with question number 1, our question was, in what ways has your local church engaged with local government officials? What more could you do? And if you have not done so, why not? So our first group leader, Melissa, we're going to go back to you. Share with us what your group talked about.
So we had one individual in our group that attends a church here in Washington, D.C. area that is right in the community of the embassy. All the ambassadors live in that area and work in that area. And so they have a target audience of world leaders at their doorstep, and they take advantage of that. And so they host events, breakfast for them to come in to get to know the Seventh-day Adventist Church. They now have an international food festival that is very popular there in the community. I've attended that and appreciate that. So that was really cool. They've invited judges to come and participate. Oh, excuse me, that was our next presentation, or another individual who's here from South Carolina. And he says he attends a smaller church, but they have an annual guest day. And they invite, community leaders to come and be their special guest for the day. They serve them breakfast. They just treat them like VIPs as they escort them all around through the church service. And so they've had judges come and participate in that. And it's been a really positive experience, both for the individuals who are coming from outside in the community and for the church members as well. And then we had another individual share that he confessed that he was the political junkie of the group, and that he's the one who has actually established relationships with his community leaders. And so because of that, he has been able to be a resource and an act for his local church. When there's particular issues that are happening, he knows who to connect them with. And I think that's fantastic. So that's what we discussed in our group.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Those are fantastic ideas. So I hope you jotted them down as things that you can bring to your church. Let's go now to, I believe, Paul. Your group also had this question, and Paul comes to us from Canada, and he is our coordinator of our Collegiate Advocates for Better Living program.
Thank you. Thank you, Melissa and Orlan, for the great presentations. And I was actually writing pretty feverishly as we went through these questions. There's kind of 3 questions packed into one here. And there was a lot going on. I had to be enlightened a little bit coming from north of the border, because Anne mentioned the fact that in her small community, they had kind of got together, not with the Seventh-day Adventists, but another group wanting to really promote the one nation under God. And of course, I had to be enlightened a little bit what that meant. And so she ended up getting that with, because she is the religious liberty rep there, she ended up kind of getting that turned around, that many of these that were trying to promote that kind of fell by the wayside, but they started doing many things within the community, having like 1,500 people attend this type of thing that now had turned around to not be following that original plan and was more looking to the Adventists as to how they could organize this. And the discussion was very good. They used this as an outreach. Also, Orlan mentioned again, because he said the key point here, I think, is, as he mentioned, that we really need to create an environment that our church community is an environment that people are welcome to, that maybe don't even know, because he said they didn't even recognize maybe that it was an Adventist church there until they started to reach out to the community, doing a variety of things, including putting little pet water stations outside of their church where people walking by the church could water their pets as they went by. Like, I don't know where you come up with this stuff. That is just amazing to me. And he said, use your young people. That's who I really engage with a lot. And I think if you can engage the young people in getting involved with this, I mean, just think of activities, sports, or other things like that, that they will be involved with within the community. Anything that you can do, from health fairs to gifts, or creating that environment. They had a running ministry in several of the churches mentioned. Anne mentioned that, Orlan mentioned that. Flo from New York says, engaged, involve the community. In our discussion, I brought up the fact that there are statements made. Ellen White makes the statements, and there's people within our church that do not vote because they feel that they shouldn't vote. And then Flo mentioned how she approaches that. And we are admonished to vote on the issues sometimes, and not on the partisan things that are involved with that. Because if we know the issues and understand the people and what they're actually standing for, these become important factors. And maybe we as a church can become much more involved with that. And I have to say that even within our church or within our conference here, religious liberty, and I think this was one of the questions, often deals only with the Sabbath thing. And when I asked one leader of the religious liberty, I said, what are you planning to do for the Sabbath? He says, I've just been given the job year after year and I've never done anything. And so this has been a crucial part for me to perhaps share with him some of the things that were discussed here today, that he can become engaged within our own church and maybe the community on a greater basis. So it was a very lively, very good discussion. So thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Paul.
I'm sure, was there anybody else that wanted to mention something out of that group? Because I told them I might call on them.
All right, anybody willing to speak up from Paul's group?
Okay, my name is Donna Lewis, and I am in New York on a church on Long Island. And what I have found is that the community itself is very resourceful, and often bringing in those resources to our church is a very nice way of networking with folks and making them feel valued. I try to look at the model when Jesus met the woman at the well. The first thing he did was to ask her for water. I find that as Adventists, we often approach people as though they're the ones in need of what we have, and that may very well be true. But if we value them, then the likelihood of their feeling connected with us creates a stronger bond from which to approach ultimate evangelism.
Thank you, Donna.
Thank you.
Absolutely. It's so important that we give people the opportunity to feel comfortable with us, to feel like that we have a good relationship, because that's always the beginning of what can lead to much more. Thank you so much for sharing. We're going to jump now to our next question in our next group. Question number 2 was to think of biblical figures who participated in politics, whether by force or by choice. What lessons can we learn from them to apply to today's society and situations? And we have Elder Roger Wade, who led this conversation. He is the ministries director for the Mid-America Union. So Brother Roger, thank you so much for being with us and sharing this Bible study with us.
Well, we had a good group. It was a little easy to begin with because we jumped right to Daniel, and we also talked about Joseph. But one of the key things that was brought out in the group is that Daniel held to his standards, and so we elevated that to the point where if we can hold to our standards today, we can participate in politics and not lose the edge that we have as Christians. Also, it was pointed out about humility was another good thing that Daniel had in particular, and he didn't promote himself, and those were characteristics that obviously we do need to see in our political characters today. Someone brought up the point about the Sabbath issue. As many of you know that we keep the Sabbath, we tend to have a lot of discussions around what we can and cannot do. And being a political figure tends to land on the side of having to do a lot of activities on the Sabbath day. And one of our participants referenced a book that was written by Joe Lieberman, which I put the title in the chat, and how he shared how he kept the Sabbath through his many years of public service. And so I haven't read the book, but obviously he at least lends to the argument that it is possible. And then someone else shared in the fact that when you actually look at the biblical characters in the Bible, who are positive biblical characters in the Bible, they tend to have kept the Sabbath, even still being in the political process. So names like Esther, Daniel, obviously Joseph, they all stayed. There was nothing written that shared that they were not continuing to keep the religious principles in which they grew up. They grew up in. It was also shared from personal experience that it is possible to stand for what is right within our religious beliefs, and especially when young people are given the choice of either participating in organized sports or participating in graduation. And one of our participants shared a personal experience that her brother actually, because of the type of character that he had through high school, his school actually voted, the student body voted to move graduation from Friday night to Thursday. And she moved back to her community where she grew up, and she's meeting folks who are referencing the fact that they belonged to the class that her brother belonged to. They were classmates of her brother, and they referenced that particular incident. So keeping the standards, holding on to it, are things that we can do today if we want to enter into the political arena. Now, I do want to say that we brought the other side. We looked at characters in the Bible who were religious leaders in particular, but were involved in politics, but did not show the kind of humility and standard bearing that Daniel and Joseph had. We talked about the high priest who could not make a determination on Jesus's guilt. I talked about the Pharisees. So there were other characters. There were characters on both sides that showed they were involved in the political process, but they were not willing to keep the standard of bearing, keeping the Sabbath, things like that. So those were some of the issues we talked about in my group.
Thank you so much, Roger.
And I'll do what Paul said. If there's anyone else in the group, I'll do what Paul said. Anyone in the group that wants to add to what I shared, they're welcome to at this time.
Okay. Yes, we'll give you a moment.
All right.
Anyone there? Well, I really appreciate that you were able to draw lessons from our positive examples and also from those who we don't want to emulate. We can learn lessons from people's mistakes too. And it's so true. We need to remember that our standards or our behaviors, our choices, how we conduct ourselves, all of these things may have larger influences than we even think. So thank you so much for sharing that. We'll go now to our last question. And we have two groups here. We generally think of religious liberty as addressing problems about working on Sabbath. Is there a role that it can play towards improving the health of your local community? And I'm going to call on Dr. Lorraine Barton, who is our Health Ministries Director for the Pacific Union. Dr. Barton, thank you for being with us today.
Well, we didn't always discuss just that, but we had some good comments in our group, and others can join in if they would like. I thought that one of the important things was mentioned by Carrie, and she suggested that one thing that we aren't doing as much as we could is educating. Not only educating ourselves, but educating others that we come in contact with about different beliefs and about the whole ideas that we were discussing today. So we talked about how, yes, we are greatly in need of more education, both for ourselves and for others. And out of that, same things that we were discussing in some of the other groups, that we need to get to know our leaders, because when you pick a subject like this, even though it's an important subject about talking about what you can do, let's say on Sabbath, some of the things we need to do for ourselves is finding out, what others believe, how they maybe view us, and etc. And so getting to know our leaders, getting more education about various subjects, even helping children to understand what the issues are in today's society is important. And yeah, this is important. How to really, within our churches themselves, how to engage with our community, I think is actually one of the more important things that we don't do well. Although one thing I think the pandemic has helped is that many churches are involved in food banks and other things during this time period. And I've seen a marked increase in the number of churches that are increasing their outreach to the public during this time. And that in itself, I think, is important as we, discuss all of these issues. How to be involved with our community, to me, is one of the most important things right now, as we seek to let people know. When I heard recently of one of our Adventist groups that has a major radio and television outreach ask people on the streets what they thought of a certain issue. It wasn't related to politics, but just related to something about the state of the dead around the Halloween time. I was shocked that very few people had any similar relationship to our beliefs. They all had all kinds of unusual and weird ideas. And so I think we forget that part of our job in anything that we discuss is letting people know who we are, just like our presenters said today. You know, they don't know us and we don't really know them as well as we think we do. You know, years ago, this country was, what would you say, you know, almost entirely a religious Christian nation, and it is no longer. And so we are not aware of what other people within our own community are believing about anything. And so I think as I listen to the programs myself today, the most important thing is learning who the other people are that are in our community, what our leaders think and believe, and get to know them. We just aren't doing that as well. I think that's our big issue right now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Barton. Absolutely. The more we can do to educate ourselves, educate each other, learn how to relate to others. That's part of the social lessons that Christ taught his disciples. I'm going to quickly share a couple of comments from our group that discussed the same question. However, we also didn't really address this particular question, but we had a really great comment from Esther, who talked about the young people that she works with as a youth leader, and that our young people are asking us the question right now, is our church relevant? If we're not engaging in the social justice questions of that society is facing, that they're struggling, they're wrestling with, and we're not there as a voice, as a learner even, then are we really being relevant? So what she has been able to do is to have weekly meetings with the young people, to have open conversation about what they think, what they feel, how they perceive what is happening, and how the church is responding, but also in that process, affirming the faith that we believe. So linking the conversation to not just what are we doing, but why are we doing it? What is the change that we are actually wanting to achieve? I really appreciated that perspective. And we also had Pastor Rodrigo, Pastor Antonio shared with us how he approaches the political leaders in his area is by simply asking for an appointment to introduce himself as a church leader in the community and sharing with the leaders the many community resources that we do have, the programs with ADRA, the Pathfinder program, all of these things that we do to serve and engage the community. It's a great way to open up those conversations with our political leaders. So we have had just a very full conversation and so many more areas that we can go down, but we do need to close. Sad to say, but we do. But what we're going to do is we're going to close with a word of prayer. So those of you who need to leave can exit after the prayer. But then our presenters, Orlan and Melissa, are going to be with us for a few more minutes to address a few questions. So if you're able to stay with us to hear these questions or to ask your questions, we'd love for you to stay. But let's close now with a word of prayer. And I'm going to ask Orlan if you would please pray for us.
Sure, let's bow our heads. Most kind and gracious Heavenly Father, thank you for being with us today, Lord. There's been so much going on in our year-end meetings and this meeting today, Lord. And I just ask, Lord, that all that we have done, that it will be to your glory, Lord. Be with us as we try to be impactful in our communities, Lord. Help us to remember to always we're the cloak of Christ so that they will always see you and never see us. Be with us to the very end. Be with our country today on this election day and allow your will to be done. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much. Again, for those of you who need to exit, thank you for being with us. For those of you who are able to stay, I'm going to pose the first question today because it came up in an email that was sent to me earlier today, and I don't know if this person is here, but they wanted to know, what about the racial tension? What can we as a church do? Do we have a voice? Should we speak in this? So I'd love to hear your thoughts. What should we do about this?
Well, I'll jump in on that one. I think the racial tension that our country is dealing with is obviously something that's been around for a very long time. And I think we've gotten to a point where more individuals are comfortable with speaking up. But I think as a church, and we talked a little bit about this yesterday at our meetings, I think there's a way for us to provide a safe place for people to have an honest conversation. And I think that's what it's really all about. I don't think it's about trying to cause people to feel badly or to intimidate or to cause others to feel where you're the problem or you're the solution. I think if we would just sit down and have more conversations and have them in a safe environment and be willing to sometimes hear the hard truths. And I think that's the reality that we're going to probably see happening. And I think the other reality is there is a generation of young people that all they speak is truth. And for some people who are uncomfortable, this generation will let you know exactly what they believe. They're going to speak their minds and they're going to ask you, what are you going to do? And I think that's the reality of what we're dealing with. But I don't think it's something that we need to run from. I think we can understand that this is part of the fabric of our country. I mean, we're talking about voting today. In the very first election in this country for George Washington, only 6% of the population could vote. You know, the country was about if you owned land, if you were a white male, and a certain age. It was 80 years before all white men could vote in America. So, I mean, so there's so many ways to look at this that if you really sit down and focus, you'll understand, you know what? We haven't started out under the best set of circumstances, but we're getting better, we're getting there, and we just have to be willing to talk about it.
Thank you so much, Orlan. And I do want to, point out, as you mentioned, the North American division, we just concluded our year-end meetings a couple hours ago today. And yesterday, Orlan facilitated a conversation on this topic. And it was really a robust, vibrant conversation. And it was the starting point. So thank you so much for doing that. I believe it should be, you can probably view the recording online. So just go to the North American Division website, nadadventist.org, and hopefully you can find where it's the link there. I don't have it right here to point it to you, but I'm sure that there will be news releases and so forth about it as well. So thank you for facilitating and bringing that conversation forward. Thank you. I'm going to open up the floor here. If anybody has a question that you'd like to put in the chat, or I saw a hand. I think I saw a hand. Yes, Elder Gill, please.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to piggyback on the racial tension. The man is a born sinner, and I don't know, Angie, whether you were born here or you born back. I don't know which country you were brought up.
I was not born in the US, no. I
Okay.
was born in India.
Well, I can only speak for my personal experience with my family. My family is from northern part of India, near the foot of Himalayas, and they're only 0.2% Adventist, and maybe only 1.5% total Christians. And it is true that when the British was ruling India, the way they converted people to Christianity, not through the Bible, but through bribery. If my children are naked and I cannot afford to pay their fee, and they missionaries, they bought the blanket, they baited that, okay, we'll give free education. So I, as a parents, bunch of children became Christian. And mostly the people are receptive to conversion when they are in need of something or when they are poor. So it is the known fact, and the most of the Christians in northern part of India, they became Christian out of poverty. So the people, even though they became Christians and they no longer is part of the segregated caste system. If you belong to certain religion, you are higher. If you belong to certain religion, you are the middle, or just like, and but the Christians were labeled that they are no longer the low caste. But because their lifestyles, their social status, their economic status is so down, people always looked down at the Christians. So I grew up in 9 children. My parents were farmers. Anytime the crops gone, my parents don't have anything. And I studied in a 1-room school, and the male will sit under the mango tree, and the girls, if the rain comes, they'll go to the room. School did not have water, drinking water, is not even hand pump. So there were some community ladies. We have to go out of the school and ask for a water. When I went to that home, they used to pour water, and I had to do like this. But the other students, they were given glass. Okay. In how practically how it worked with my family, or with my first thing, that when I was 19 years old, I accepted the Adventist truth. And then I brought the Adventist movement in my village against the approval of my father. What I focused on promoting, walk in the Lord, study, go higher as much as you can. So the 2 things I focused. Then I focus on female in the families or in the relatives. So to conclude my thoughts, 2 things can remove a big dent of racial or caste system or class system. If you have a high education, you have a good job, people are submissive to you. You have a lot of subordinates. Then you are walking in the Lord. Thank God the gift of Sabbath, that we are nicely dressed. People are watching us. We are going as a family. And then other people are watching how our family is so happy. So, and when the other people, non-Christian, they watch, or other people, they watch these 2 things, higher education and be faithful in the Lord. That can bring attention, a gap very very, very rapidly.
Thank
remove this.
you. Thank you so much, Elder Gill, for sharing your personal experience at how that has worked. That's very valuable. We appreciate that. Okay, any further questions that anyone has? If not, I am going to pose a question here, because what I heard a lot that both you and both of you shared, Orlan and Melissa, is that a lot of what we're really talking about is to be representatives of Christ, even before we consider ourselves as affiliated with any political party. That we need to know who we are. Who are we going to align ourselves with first and foremost? Can you just share with us a little bit more? Drill that home for us. Why is that really important as you consider what we know as Seventh-day Adventists, looking into what we believe are the prophetic events and just things that we expect to unfold from our understanding of Scripture?
Sure. Well, I'll jump in first, and then Orlan, if you want to follow up after that. I think particularly, I'm glad you brought up the prophetic component, Angie, because when I was talking about partisan politics earlier, we certainly we know from Daniel and Revelation that there will be antagonism from both the left and the right, as far as politically at the end of time toward us, right? And so we really need to make sure, again, that our allegiance is with Christ and Christ alone. And so that doesn't mean we don't make use of the political mechanisms that are available to us to care for our earthly responsibilities. But what it does mean is that we keep them in their very specific sphere, and we never compromise our belief system in order to be able to engage the political system. I think, unfortunately, we can see examples of faith leaders who have compromised their spiritual integrity because of the lure of political power. And it's understandable. Power is intoxicating, right? And so I think we want to be very careful of that. And so I appreciate that question.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we have to remember is, this world that we are in right now is not our final home. And anything that you engage in where you are preparing as though you will be here forever is contrary to what God has in store for us. The idea that you would be so caught up in who's in charge politically that you would be willing to be disrespectful to your brothers or your neighbors or whatever the case may be, it doesn't prepare you to be drawn closer to Christ. And at the end of the day, you're either doing something to draw yourself and others closer to Christ, or you're pushing them further away from Christ. And I think those decisions that we make, should have that as paramount interest. And I think that's how we can get to the point where you can find yourself trying to be impactful in your community. I mean, Jesus was not passive in what he did in any way. He was not afraid to go out and speak truth to power. And he was not afraid to let people know who he was. I mean, everyone knew he was the carpenter's son. Everyone knew he was the one that was preaching, but he never tried to shy away, but nor did he ever really try to bring attention to himself. And I think that's the role that we as Christians should be looking to do, make an impact in your community without trying to elevate self in any way, and then let the Holy Spirit handle all the rest. And I think that will be the safest way to move forward.
Amen. Thank you so much. I'm going to pose one more final question to close us out. And this one hopefully will be helpful to all of us over the next few days and weeks, because you talked about political thoughts and ideals. And these are issues that can be very personal to some individuals and can run very deep as well. It can be part of who they are. And we may find some feeling rather frustrated or angst, or you know, there are very strong feelings that come about, especially over the next few days. Whatever happens with our election, there are going to be some very strong feelings. Can you share with us some practical things an individual could do if they feel that, you know, they're falling down, they're going down that road, and maybe they're recognizing now that that's not where they should be heading? What can they do to kind of retreat from that, to turn around and come back to a safer, healthier frame of mind?
The one thing I would suggest was to find tangible ways to be involved in your community on the local level. So sometimes we feel like we can be powerless on a national stage. You know, we hear things like, well, my vote doesn't matter because I'm in a predominantly blue state or predominantly red state and I vote the opposite. And so, blah, blah, you know, we can feel sort of a small fry sort of situation. But if we are feeling frustrated or discouraged or disappointed, it always is, if we deflect the attention off of ourselves and what we're experiencing and look for the opportunity to serve others. I have found personally that has been beneficial to me when I'm dealing with whatever issue of anxiety or frustration or depression, or just whenever any of those negative emotions come about, whatever the source is looking for tangible ways that I can make changes where I can see those tangible results.
I mean, I think that's exactly on point. And, you know, and I think at the end of an election, one of the most important things you can do is just sit down and pray and start talking to the Lord about what he would have for you to do right now. You know, when you think about stories in the Bible, you know, someone like Daniel actually moved from one administration to another administration to another administration and still was called upon to lead, and he was never willing to not represent the God that he loved. You know, even when the laws changed, he still opened his windows and prayed. He was not shying away. And I think the most important thing is when you do what God has instructed you to do, he will put you or allow you to be in positions where you can be a witness for him. Because at the end of the day, this is not about trying to be friends with politicians. This is about living a life where you can be a witness for Christ. And when you are a witness for Christ, it doesn't matter what party anybody is with that encounters you. And I think that's the role that you ought to play. Democrat, Republican, Independent, whoever wins, you should be on the side of Christ, and they should know that when they see you. And I think that's the most important thing, no matter who ends up winning or losing.
Amen. Amen. And with that thought, I think we are ready to close up for today. There is so much more that I wish we could talk about, but I need to let you all go. Thank you again for being with us here. Thank you, Orlan and Melissa, for this very, very inspiring, but also informative and compelling presentation. We look forward to hearing more about what religious liberty does, and hopefully working together again. I know it's going to happen. Can you just share with us quickly your website or the best way to get in touch with you if we want some of those resources that you mentioned?
Right, so great, and thank you so much to Health Ministries for this opportunity. It's been such a treat for us, and like I said earlier, we've been learning as well. And so I'm walking away from this conversation encouraged and enthusiastic. So thank you so much to both Health Ministries and the participants tonight. Our websites are www.religiousliberty.info, www.religiousliberty.info, and then libertymagazine.org. Those are the two websites for both the North American Religious Liberty Association and Liberty Magazine. Again, please reach out to us if you have any additional follow-up questions, and we would be so happy to have an additional conversation with you.